Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing topic of conversations with. And today I have the pleasure of having Carolina Castillo, a fellow Colombian, a voter activist, and very involved in the community. And our conversation today, well, before we go into our topic, Carolina, welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Gladys. Un placer estar aquí contigo. Hello, viewers. Good morning. De verdad que Gladys, I'm so happy to be here on your show. Congratulations. I've been following you since you were Vice Mayor to Aventura and Power of the Heels. The last time I saw you was at a Roots List event pre-pandemic with my daughter. So this is lovely to see you here today. A little bit about myself. For those who don't know, I am a Colombian American. I am a Democratic woman for 28 years. I'm a journalist, an advocate on issues like voting rights, LGBTQ, women's rights, racial justice, climate change. I'm an entrepreneur and a communication specialist. I'm the president of Source Lawyer Relations that does marketing and PR for lawyers and nonprofits. I also belong to many organizations like Roots List Florida, League of Women Voters, and I was the president of the Women's Chamber of Commerce of Miami-Dade County. I gave them 4 years of lots of volunteer hours to change our community and focus on uplifting women. In 2020, I also worked for Danielle Levine Cava's mayoral campaign for her mayoral win as our first woman mayor of Miami-Dade County. And I also worked for Florida for All in 2020, right before the presidential elections, as a state director for the women's constituency, again, getting out the votes for the presidency in our local elections.
Wow. You beat me to volunteering.
We have to stay active, amiga. That's what
Yes,
we do as a Colombian American community. We are active in our community.
like they say in Colombia, no nos quedamos quietas.
Claro que no. Hay que echar para adelante because we have to be that guide and mentor for our children, right? I have my daughter who's 11 years old, and she's herself an advocate as well because she's learned from me. We have to be an example for our children.
We teach by example.
Exactamente, exactamente.
So let me start by telling the people why I wanted to talk to you today. Okay. I read your piece in the Herald. You wrote a very nice opinion piece about what's going on in Colombia with the next election in 2022. And with Gustavo Petro leading big time at the polls, you're saying that what are the consequences for Florida and the Colombian community in Florida? We're not talking the huge consequence of the country, but here in Florida. So tell me, what's your view on that before we even go to the topic of who Gustavo Petro is for those who don't know?
Please stay on because the Gustavo Petro situation is very dangerous. And yes, I was motivated to write the op-ed opinion piece on the Miami Herald in regards to what's going on. Miami-Dade, as you know, Gladys, we are the largest Colombian American population by state and county in the US. Florida and Miami-Dade are going to be the most impacted by what's going on in the crisis with Colombia, okay? And what we are seeing in Colombia is dire in regards to peaceful protests, right? So a month ago, what happened was Iván Duque, who's the president, came out and gave a tax reform that was affecting the middle class and the lower class. So of course, everything erupted into protest because of the pandemic, poverty there has exasperated, and it just wasn't the right time. Went into protest. There was a lot of talk of violations from the police officers to the people. And so Miami-Dade, I heard only from a couple of Democrats that said, okay, human rights violations, you got to get it together, Ivan Duque. That was a month ago. In that month, Gladys, there hasn't been much talk in Miami-Dade in regards to what is going on in Colombia. And that has concerned me because we need to have our Democratic leaders, our Republican leaders really voice what is going on in Colombia. And as soon as the protest exploded, really, the Ivan Duque immediately changed gears. He said, okay, I'm stopping the taxes. That's not going to happen. The protests kept going. What happened was that what we have to see is that it wasn't only peaceful protests, okay? There was infiltrators from the left, and this is not disinformation. I know a lot of you might think that this is information, especially on the left, looters and rioters that were destroying our transportation, our communications, our banks, our Justice Department, our police department, setting on fire, destroying our private homes, our private cars. And so it turned into this huge issue in Colombia, that it wasn't anymore about human rights violations. It wasn't anymore about peaceful protest.
Or it wasn't
right?
even about the taxes.
It wasn't even more about the taxes.
Creating violence paid by other groups.
Exactly, which Petro is the perpetrator of those groups. He is in charge of those groups. So I understand Miami-Dade when Petro, he himself is postulándose, saying that he is a Democrat progressive, whereas he's not. He's a militant M19 guerrillero domestic terrorist who is now using the protests to gain power for 2022 elections, who is politicizing the whole thing to gain power for 2022. Ivan Duque cannot run in 2022. And so right now, as you were saying, Gladys, yes, Petro, the more that the people attack, sorry about that, the more people attack Duque and what he's done wrong, the more they help in raising Petro's power and rise to the presidency. Okay, so we got to be very careful with that. What we need to support the Colombian government.
The one thing that we really need to know is who Petro is. Petro was part of the M19, but I am all for second chances. Because another one that there was another guerrilla member that was elected publicly, and he did an amazing job. So it's not about being in the guerrilla, but it's about having second chances. But what Petro is doing is taking advantage of the violence that's going on in Colombia. And the other part is that people in Colombia are totally forgetting that he was the mayor of Bogota, and it was a disaster during those years. There was a whole corruption issue regarding the basuras, that he bought all the old truck from Fort Lauderdale. So I want to share with everyone a picture so that you can get an insight of who Petro was surrounded by. And I'm not going to share it long, but you see Petro here is next to the very famous Pablo Escobar. And we all know that Pablo Escobar used to run the biggest narco guerrilla in Colombia. And M19 was funded by the narco guerrilla in Colombia. So that's the whole politics side of Colombia. Now in Florida.
But let's get real. So M19, for those who don't know, they are responsible for kidnappings. They are responsible for murders. They are responsible for violence. So when the Democratic or even Republican side talk about human violations, there is no greater human violations than La Guerrilla de Petro, the M19, and the FARC. So when people here in Miami-Dade County start saying, the problem is not the FARC, the problem is Uribe, that is dangerous, and that kind of rhetoric needs to stop, because the direct and indirect support that you are giving to Petro is dangerous. So I just like to sound the alarm, as Gladys so well is doing, because we are in a very difficult situation and we need to be on the right side of history.
Well, let me ask you something. Yes, because you're totally right, but also being fair, Navarro Wolf was also part of the M19. He ran and he did a very good job. He totally changed. He was a progressive Democrat and he did a good government. So
you know what's funny? What's funny, that Petro has been in government because of a peace treaty that happened in 1990. They gave him immunity because when they arrested Petro with explosives in his home and illegal firearms, they arrested Petro. They gave him immunity. So he was a domestic terrorist. Imagine that in Miami-Dade, right? So he's a domestic terrorist. Because of a peace treaty, they gave him immunity. He was able to run in politics. He ran without telling people when he was in his 20s that he was an M19. And so he was deceitful, right from the start. This is a very intelligent man. He is a Chavista, Chavo Castrista, like he is with Chavez. And I put him in the likes of Castro, of Chavez, and he is a very intelligent man. If you look at his Twitter account, if you look at his messaging is very, very, very similar to the Democrats here in Miami, to the progressive Democrats. And the way he positions himself as a statesman, and he's very intelligent, because that is how he is trying to get the progressives in Miami-Dade County to believe him, the liberal left in Miami-Dade County to believe him. What they don't know is that he's using the word progressive in a deceitful and manipulative way, because he has been the mayor of Bogota, and he did a horrendous job. He put his guerrilleros in his cabinet, and they did a horrendous job. And everything points to comunismo. Everything points to communism. So though he looks great on paper, and though I understand a lot of the Democratic progressives that don't know his history, how they can be manipulated, and how can they can even be ignorant as to who he really is, because he looks fantastic on paper. But when you know the history of this man, when you read up, when you research, when you know what he is a communist, Chavismo, Castro. And let me tell you, the Venezuelans here, the Nicaraguenses here in Miami-Dade, los Colombianos, we know we are the majority voice, and we know what this man is about.
So let me tell you a little bit. Let me go back a little bit. When he was mayor of Bogota, he was not able, he was destituted to run again for office. And so to remind everybody that Santos pardoned him. Back then, President Santos pardoned him in order to get help to win the presidency for his reelection. So this man was second time pardoned to run again because he was destituted. So now we're getting a second time around and he's getting away with it.
Déjame decirte, the Santos Peace Treaty, 10 years ago, I am a Democrat. I've been a Democrat for 28 years, and I never agreed with it because what happens is that people, domestic terrorists like Pedro, then now have the opportunity, look where he's at, to now run for president in 2022 for Colombia. I will never agree to the peace. That to me is a marketing word. The peace treaty is a marketing word that's given an open door and an open window to domestic terrorists like Pedro to run for office.
It has an end. The kidnaps are starting. Violence is starting. The drug is again booming. So it has an end. But let me tell you two things. Colombia is the third most powerful partner with Florida in economic trade. When we're talking about a castrista or a chavismo, the reason you're saying that Petro is intelligent, Petro is brilliant. The way that he talks to people. But in my vocabulary, Castro was brilliant, Chavez was brilliant, and Hitler was brilliant.
Absolutely, 100%.
So they're all brilliant people trying to use their speech to get what they want. And this is why we need to open their eyes. This is why we need to do something.
100%. So when Biden ran, and this is the situation, Biden has been compared to Petro and Duque has been compared to Trump. It is the most erroneous and the most horrendous messaging that you can ever see, because Biden has never been in la guerrilla, he's never been a terrorist, he's never been arrested, he's never been together with Chavista, Castro. So Biden is not Petro. Please do not get that confused.
No, because there is, let's go back a little bit, because that's my next question for you.
Dime.
Here, there's two sides of the story. One, if you're a Democrat, one, if you're a Republican. And in this case, I'm talking as an independent. I'm in the middle, okay? So the Republicans say that the Democrats are leftist and socialist, but there's one big difference that we're not getting. And coming from Latin America, we can totally relate to what a socialism is, to what communism is. And Petro, Chavez, Castro is completely different of a progressive Democrat. The expropriation of land. The expropriation of land has never occurred in the United States. Never in the history of the Democratic Party has anyone expropriated any land, while Castro has, Chavez has, and we're looking at Petro because now part of his agenda says that he needs some of the property to house the people that are homeless. So what's the story behind it? Okay, I'm gonna take your house, I'm gonna give it to the homeless. This is called expropriation. And it's completely different from a socialist point of view. And let me tell you, Israel is a socialist country. Sweden is a socialist country where everybody has the right to have insurance. And Medicare in this country it's a view like that. So we're fighting for insurance.
So what Petro is over there is Castro Chavismo, right? Where versus let's compare him to a socialist like Bernie. So Bernie, I'm a Democrat, I'm a moderate Democrat, meaning I vote moderate. So this is what's going on. So politics have become so radicalized, Gladys. The right radicalization, the Trump supporters, and even worse than that, the Marjorie Greene, the Matt Gaetz, still saying that Trump is president and that Democrats stole the election and attacked the Capitol. That is radicalization. That is completely to the right. That it has no truth. It's gone through the Justice Department. It's gone through the Supreme Courts. There is no truth that Trump is the president. So you have that radicalization on the right. On the left, you have then the radicalization of Castro Chavismo, really radicalized people who actually support Petro, and actually believe that this man is a progressive. He's not. He's a domestic terrorist. Look at just because he calls himself a progressive does not mean he's a progressive as Miamians are. So what's going on right now in Miami-Dade County, Gladys? I'm a moderate, though I have social, obviously LGBTQ rights and pro-choice and all of that. I'm still a moderate voter. So what's happening to the voters right now, to the Colombians, to the Venezuelans, to the Cubans, to the Nicaraguenses, they feel, because of the radicalization, politically homeless. A lot of them want to become independents like yourself, Gladys. A lot of the Democrats that I've been speaking to in the Colombian community want to become independents because they see that the messaging on the left, very left, and the messaging on the very right, which are the loudest messagings, do not go with who they are as a community, who they are as a family, who they are from where they came, which was their country. So we have to look at us in Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade County needs the moderate vote in order for it to stay democratic, needs a middle ground. So what we're talking about is finding a common ground, finding most things that bring us together instead of setting us apart. But what happens is the radical voices are the loudest. So what's going on is people like you and I, the middle ground, we need to speak up. We need to stand up and for our communities, our Colombian community right now, our Nicaraguense community, our Venezuelan community. We are not communists. So, you know, Democrats are not communists. But it's the radical voices that are so loud that drown the middle ground, and we're all trying to say, wait, we're feeling politically right now.
Why aren't they comparing it to communist Russia? Because it's totally different. I get it that we have very different views, each one. And this is why this country is a free country. So that 100%. We can express, and so that we can express our views. But what are the implications of Petro getting, let's say, and God forbid that Petro wins the Colombian election? What are the implications in Florida?
So the implications if Petro wins, this is the implication. The US government, the US government has been 100% tied to the US policy in the last 20 years of Colombia. Colombia has been the biggest ally for the USA. Under Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, for 20 years. We support them in their security. We support them through the 50-year war that's happened in Colombia. Colombia is our eyes and ears and our biggest ally, going from Colombia extends through Argentina all the way through El Salvador. Okay, the moment Petro, if he rises to president, who is a communist, you know, like we've said, and a very intelligent man, what happens with him, he will take that support from the US government and exchange it with China and Russia. What happens? That we lose our biggest ally in South America. What happens? That communism will then spread. We don't want to become another Venezuela. We don't want to become another Cuba. But the moment Petro rises to power, we will go into that communism, and he won't work with the USA. He will instead work with Russia and China, which is Chavez. It's exactly what Chavez did. It's what Castro did. And these are the people who he admires. These were his friends. Let's get real.
But now Peru is in the border. So it's not only Peru, Argentina, Nicaragua. Nicaragua just arrested the person that's running against the president, and she is under house arrest because she has been opposed. So look at Russia. His biggest opponent is in jail.
Pero Gladys, don't you remember in 2020 when Democrats and Republicans were with Guaido, who was the interim president, and they were like, Guaido, we support you, Guaido, we have your back. And this were Democrats and Republicans. Pero what I'm trying to say is, which is what I was trying to say with my opinion piece in the Miami Herald, let's not wait until Colombia turns communist under Petro. Let's raise our voices. We need our voices from our democratic leaders. We need their voices to say, Duque, we don't like you, but we have your back. You don't have to be an Uribista. You don't have to love Duque, but you know what? He is the democratic president right now, and we need to support him as much as we can so we can keep a democracy. And as well as the USA, Secretary Blinken just told Joaquin Castro yesterday. So Joaquin Castro is the Texas congressman. And Joaquin Castro asked Secretary Blinken, do you think that we need to leverage our security support to Colombia and maybe stop that in order for these human violations? I'm like, this guy's a Democrat, and he is saying to our Secretary of State Blinken to stop the support. I am insulted. As a Democrat, I was insulted to hear that from Joaquin Castro, instead of saying, we support you, Colombia. We will always support you. You are our biggest ally. We have your back. We will help you fix the situation. That is what we need to hear from both Democrat and Republicans, just like they did with Venezuela and Guaido. Don't wait until Colombia is communist to come out and say, we support the interim president against Petro. No, don't wait. The time is now. The urgency is now. And Gladys and I are sounding the alarm because we need to hear every single voice, every Democratic leader and every Republican leader supporting Colombia at this time.
And just for everybody to know, we're still waiting for approval to talk to the Council General of Colombia on the actual situation. But he has not been giving the okay to talk to us publicly. So we're still waiting. My other concern is that if Petro rises to the presidency, the United States will be dealing with a terrorist.
That's the situation that we are facing. And that's why Miami-Dade, Gladys, we need to be the loudest voice, because we are going to be extremely affected in Miami-Dade. And you know what? We have the power to influence the 2022 election in Colombia. We have the power. Our Democratic leaders, our Republican leaders have the power to influence the presidential election in 2022. Why are we staying quiet? Why are we not speaking up? I've reached out to the mayor's office, Daniela Levincava. I'm waiting for a meeting with her. As you know, I supported her very much for her mayoral race. I'm waiting for Senator Annette Tadeo as well to answer my calls in regards to having an open dialogue, in regards to getting out the message and talking to our Colombian community. This is urgent. This is urgent. What about
the elected officials in Senate as well from the other side?
100%. Pero Gladys, let me tell you something. Marco Rubio has been the loudest voice. He has already said he's talking to Ivan Duque. Colombia has his the support. He's going to work in the federal government to bring Colombia support. I want to hear that from the Democrats here in Miami-Dade County. I haven't heard that yet. So I have the sense of urgency to meet with them, because our Colombian community needs to hear from our Democratic leaders as to where they stand with Colombia, as to their support to Colombia, as to not directly or indirectly supporting Petro, because that is going to destroy our country. So these are the voices, the moderate voices, Gladys, me, myself. We are the majority of the voices that want to hear from our Democratic leaders. Because the Republicans, Gladys, I have to tell you, they are doing a good job in regards, like Marco Rubio, saying, we've got your back.
Got your back. Yeah, you're right. So with that, Carolina, our time is over.
I could talk all day. I could talk all day. We have to do this again, Gladys.
I love your enthusiasm. I love your passion. Thank you.
I'm very passionate about this, Gladys, because listen, I was raised in Miami-Dade County. My closest friends are Cubanos. I know exactly what we are looking at with Colombia, and I don't want that to happen to my country. I grew up, I was born there. I have family there. I've already had to send money to Colombia because the situation is bad. And I don't want us to be another Cuba. So this is something that I'm going to keep talking about. I appreciate your invitation to the show because this is only the beginning for me in regards to bringing voice to our Colombian community.
Thank you so much. And with that, everybody stay safe and until next Wednesday. Have a great day.
Gracias, Gladys. Chao, chao.